We got three gentlemen joining us on the stage right now, ready to give impact. And that's what it's about. Ready to give information. Here for a conversation around empowering through data, analysis, and technology. We got Kyle Braden of iShares by BlackRock, Bill Daig, head of alt data at NASDAQ, and Fintech's own Patrick Shaddow. Let's hear it for our guys.
All right, excellent. So just kind of kick this off. My name is Patrick Shaddow. I'm the president of Syntax Indices. We're a small but rapidly growing data provider, index provider, and index publication company. Today, I'm joined on stage by Bill Daig of NASDAQ and Kyle Braden from iShares. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Bill?
Sure, yeah. Hello, good morning, everybody. I'm Bill Daig. I lead alternative data and a NASDAQ Data Link platform at NASDAQ. I have a background in technology and data science and have moved over to kind of run the business to help empower investors with data and insights. From the alternative data side of the business, we're really focused on how do we find unique, interesting sources of information that drive better investment decisions, better outcomes. So things like, insurance policy data, credit card receipts, that kind of thing. And then Data Link is our platform for kind of delivering this data. So easy to use APIs, discovery through, a web portal. The data's, easy to consume, easy to integrate with what you have. So this is a platform we use to deliver our own content, but it's also a place where we have third-party marketplace for people to bring content that they want to sell to a broader audience. So that's something that we're excited about and I want to talk more about.
Hi, I'm Kyle Braden, Director of Platform Development and Business Intelligence for the direct channel at iShares. And our group's purpose at iShares is really to build that connectivity between iShares and the end investor, and then also the platforms that serve them. Ultimately, we do that through using, broad look at data and delivering technologies, ultimately to better serve our clients and ensure that we become the ETF provider of choice for self-directed investors.
Great. So to kick it off, we have a couple questions that we want to ask our esteemed panel here. And last week we had a prep call as you normally do for these types of panels. And one of the angles we discussed in our call last week includes delivering technology and data to address gaps in the market. So what I'd like to do is start there and talk about why these gaps exist and how they can be filled. Bill, I'd like to start with you.
Sure. Yeah. I think there are a number of gaps, obviously. Thank God there's a lot of opportunity to provide value. From a data side, I think it's probably no surprise to anybody here at this event that data is becoming way more important in terms of driving investment decisions from retail investors through institutional. That's been a trend for the last several years. So there's always a need for unique, interesting sources of insight that are going to say something new. How do I measure something that's relevant and important and going to help me be smarter about the world? So that's what we try to do in the alt data business. We try to service that particular need of finding unique, interesting sources from outside the financial services world. And then the other gap I think is really, really present especially in the institutional investment management side, is how do I leverage technology to bring more data into my process and actually get the value. So that time to value of integrating a new data set, being agile, adapting my investment processes, adapting my approach to integrate more content, I think has been a really big struggle. Firms have spent the last few years collecting a lot of different data sets, and now it's time to figure out, okay, how do I do this efficiently? So scaling up, I think, is a big gap.
And also data integration as well, right?
Absolutely.
In terms of, you got one data set here, one data set here, they might not necessarily reconcile with one another. So a lot of the gaps could potentially be addressing, the inconsistency of the same data, the metric that's being determined, but through different sources. Yeah. So Kyle, I kind of turn the same question to you. What kind of gaps do you see in the market and what kind of technologies are you using to to address those.
So thanks, Patrick. So I think one of the biggest gaps we see in the retail space is there's a lot of tools and there's a lot of data that has historically been reserved for the professional investor community, and we're working to really get that down to the end investor level. And I'm not talking about real-time quotes or charting capabilities that have seemed to be the industry standard nowadays, but I'm talking about actual tools and data that wealth managers use, that financial advisors use to manage money, and ultimately advise their clients. And what we challenge ourselves with is how do we bring that down again to the retail level, make that more widely available, and with the understanding that in the last 2 years we've seen 40 million new self-directed investment accounts opened up globally. That's 30 million here in the United States. And so these investors are demanding this data and they're demanding this technology to put themselves on a level playing field with the professionals out there.
Isn't that a wonderful thing when you have more financial consumers in the market exercising their ability to partake in the financial markets?
Yeah.
I mean, the data is everywhere, right? And we all know that you can get data from this source, and everyone has their data. So what I kind of want to think about today is data in and of itself information, or how do you convert data to information in and of itself? How can you make information more readily available from data sources so that you can make better investment decisions, so you can make better analyses that ultimately will empower your clients? So what I'd like to kind of ask you is, what kind of data are you bringing in, and then how are you transferring that to information?
You want to go?
Yeah, go ahead. So I would say that's a huge pain point right now. With iShares having a global presence and having over 1,200 ETFs available on different markets and in different continents, we see a broad set of data coming in. And one of the misconceptions is, or if you were in data in your organization that you probably understand, is that it always doesn't come from one place. Right? It comes from, sometimes we have internal resources. Sometimes we get data from the direct platforms themselves. And sometimes it's a third-party intermediary. And so how do we consume that data, bring it in, develop actionable insights that our clients, our self-directed platforms can use to better serve their clients as well?
Actionable and accessible. Bill?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a huge part of it, as Kyle was mentioning. NASDAQ is also a very global business. We have, I think it's over 1 billion people who consume NASDAQ data, right, in some form or another around the world. Even on the Data Link platform, we have over 800,000 users, from retail to professional, quant hedge funds. So when we think about how do we bring products that are going to be value add, especially for that retail, more self-directed investor, we really have to think about what's the investment life cycle, what's the workflow, and how can we present the data in a way that's going to be easy to digest. So it's not just having it's easy to use APIs, Excel plugins, et cetera, but it's also putting the data in context and helping the user get there. So creating a product that's easy to read and easy to understand, that's intuitive, but also gives you says something meaningful, right? It's very easy, I think, to kind of water it down a little too much. So trying to find that right balance of providing information, providing measurements, but also helping the user get there. So we've last year we launched a product based on, of course, there was a lot of interest in retail activity in the market, and so we launched a product based basically on public information, looking at SIP market data, and we're parsing that. So we have really intelligent algorithms to figure out what is actually retail trading that's happening on these data feeds, and we distill that down into a retail trading activity tracker. And that gives you, it's basically a sentiment score. It tells you what are other retail investors doing. Are they net buyers or net sellers of a particular stock on this day? And I think that helps investors figure out, kind of where they sit in the landscape and whether they want to be contrarian or go with the flow. That's up to them.
So that's a very interesting topic, right? Go with the flow. So the flow of funds is a major advancement in the ability to ascertain who is buying, who's selling, and what types of equity investors are actually doing that. Are they hedge funds? Are they institutional investors? Are they family offices? Are they retail investors? And so what I've always been kind of interested in is essentially identifying what I would call the holy market or the holy grail of market timing. If you could ascertain types of companies that have a common shared attribute that are being traded by a family office to a broker-dealer or a broker-dealer to a family office, what you're essentially saying is someone's unloading their position. And they're unloading a position or they're buying into a position based upon some kind of common attribute. So that's a very interesting data set that you're kind of creating there. Kyle, what kind of data sets do you guys use at iShares to really help your end investors?
Yeah, so so to your point here on the retail investor and trends that we see is we look at flows data, just like you mentioned earlier. And I think one of the misconceptions is that people are trading in and out on self-directed platforms. Well, what we actually see by looking into the data is that retail investors are getting smarter and smarter. We're seeing 2/3 to 3/4 of our flows this year from self-directed platforms have come to fixed income products. And you wouldn't necessarily, associate a retail investor with investing in bonds or the fixed income community as well. And so using that data to debunk some of those misconceptions is definitely something that has opened our eyes here this year at iShares.
Sure. So maybe each one of you want to discuss some case studies or talk about trends or tips for our audience members as it relates to data, bringing data in, different types of platforms that you use to analyze your data, and then ultimately the dissemination, distribution portals that you use to get your information and data out.
I can start. I mean, I go back to the gap of agility with how you use data to drive in decision making generally. I think this applies even outside of financial services industry. That's a challenge that I think just any enterprise has to deal with, and individuals too, but in particular enterprises, I think. And so that's something that, NASDAQ, we have our own challenges with how we deal with our own data. And so we're actually leveraging our NASDAQ data link platform to pass data around our organization to make sure that it's governed and has, the right controls and is logically consistent. And so we're also kind of taking a look at what can we do to enhance that platform and bring that value to other organizations. So we have some buy-side institutions actually also leveraging the platform for that same use case, which is helping them be a lot more agile and helping PMs, for example, on the front line say, I need to integrate new content into a strategy. Every day I don't have a strategy in production, I'm losing money. Right. So if we can get this integrated and deployed more quickly and streamline that workflow and that process, they're making more money, right? Which is compelling value proposition. So that's something that we've really kind of tried to lean into, this idea of kind of thinking about data sets and data content, not as like, some technology asset, but really as a product, as a finished product. And so serving up content in a way that's ready to eat, ready to go for a particular use case. That's really what we're building with DataLink. We're users ourselves, and we're happy to provide that service to clients too.
Love it. Kyle?
Yeah, same thing. So we had a client that came to us, and they're a well-diversified financial institution that came to us and said, hey, look, we're doing a great job of acquiring people on our deposit side of the business, and we're doing a great job of acquiring new customers on the lending side of the business, but what we're struggling with is cross-selling into the digital investment platform that we have set up. And so they shared a bunch of their consumer data with us, and having that global look, we applied that and applied some of the best practices where we've seen success with what they're trying to do in other regions around the world, and are working with them currently in partnership to develop some new ETF solutions that we're hoping to launch in the new year.
I love it. It's almost like a feedback loops, right? So essentially you have users using your data, and then you start seeing how they're using your data so that you can better design new systems for that delivery mechanism. Is that something that you've experienced in your career here?
Oh, absolutely. That's something that, again, we benefit from having hundreds of data sets on the platform. We get to see what users are investing in, what content is interesting to them. You mentioned flows. Flows is a super hot topic right now. Everybody's interested in investor flows right now. And so how can we design products and build out a product portfolio that plays to that? I mentioned retail. So being responsive, actually, and being agile with what kind of products we bring to market is hugely beneficial. I think it's an advantage for us.
And what kind of timing mechanism is involved in bringing a new product to market in terms of data? And how much scrubbing of data are you doing on a day in and day out basis, as we started this panel off, where you have a primary metric, but two different sources might have inconsistent data? So what do you do when you start thinking about scrubbing data, and then do you kind of taint the data, or do you want to kind of Windsorize particular attributes and get rid of outliers? Or maybe we can expand upon these topics.
Yeah, that's a huge pain point right now, and you know, one of the things that we definitely think about is like, do we continue to use internal resources to source and organize and consume the data, or do we go external and try to do it as well? And you know, I would challenge, you know, the leaders in this room to really look at the capabilities of your organization and your team, and understand what you're capable of, and understand that no matter which, you know, direction or approach you take, you're likely going to use internal and external sources regardless.
Yeah, and it's almost like you got data, and then you got derived data, and then you have the ability to then license your derived data. And a lot of the sticking points that I've come across is I consume data, and then I make new data off of that old data. And you know, when I want to start beginning to attribute or provide an attribution analysis of how I ultimately came up with a given score or metric or rating, I often infringe or technically almost infringe on, you know, the intellectual property of the data that I'm insourcing. So how do you guys kind of get around that?
I think proper governance is really an important part of the workflow, right? And I think that's something where it's a fine balance of how do you show your work, which is super important, but also how do you make sure that, you know, you're staying in bounds in terms of like what you're able to do with the content. So it's a fine balance for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right, well, that's, I think, it, guys. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time today. Our panel is up, but hopefully you learned something.